Welcome to our deep dive into the ethics of science and technology. You've picked a topic with huge implications. To tackle this, we've got excerpts from UNESCO's site. They're taking the international perspective. And some deep dives from the Hastings Center, a U.S. bioethics research institute. Buckle up, there's a lot to cover.
Indeed, these sources provide a fascinating contrast. UNESCO tackles these big picture issues like AI, neurotechnology, and even climate change. While the Hastings Center really zooms in on specific bioethics dilemmas, they use these real-world cases, which I always find helps ground the conversation.
It's like getting the global view and then the street-level view, which is awesome. Our mission, if you will, is to give you a solid grasp of the key ethical questions these advancements raise. But we're not just talking theory here. We'll be diving into some truly thought-provoking cases to really illustrate these points.
It's going to be a fascinating journey. So shall we start with UNESCO? They're known for World Heritage Sites. But as you delved into their work, you saw they're taking on a much bigger role in this world of rapidly advancing science.
Exactly. It's like they're stepping up to be the ethics referees as science gets more and more powerful. What I found interesting is how they call themselves a standard setter. They're not just pointing fingers, they're trying to create actual guidelines for everyone to follow.
That global perspective is crucial, especially with technologies like AI and neurotechnology, which we'll discuss more in a bit. These advancements have implications that reach far beyond national borders, so having a global body like UNESCO working on ethical frameworks is essential.
Okay, so let's talk about AI. You've probably noticed it's everywhere now, but UNESCO isn't just celebrating the cool factor, they're highlighting some serious ethical concerns. What are they most worried about?
Their focus is on the need for what they call sound and reasoned policies. AI can be this amazing tool for good. Think about healthcare, education, all sorts of fields. But it can also be misused or even just accidentally create new problems. The big question is, how do we make sure AI is developed and used in a way that protects basic human rights, dignity, and fairness?
Right, because it's one thing to say, hey, let's have ethical AI, but how do we actually enforce that? UNESCO even has this thing called the Global AI Ethics and Governance Observatory. Sounds pretty intense.
It is. Think of it as a global watchdog for AI. They monitor developments, conduct research, and even make policy recommendations to governments around the world. The goal is to ensure that AI benefits all of humanity, not just a select few. And that requires a globally coordinated effort.
Got it. So from setting standards to monitoring progress, UNESCO is really trying to get a handle on this AI revolution. But let's move on to something that's maybe even more mind-boggling, neurotechnology. We're talking about reading minds, enhancing cognition, stuff that seems straight out of science fiction. Where do we even begin to draw ethical lines here?
It's a double-edged sword. On one hand, the potential is incredible. Imagine being able to treat devastating brain diseases like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's with neurotechnology. That's a game changer. But as with any powerful tool, there's the potential for misuse. UNESCO is raising concerns about the possibility of things like mind control or the creation of cognitive enhancements that could lead to new forms of inequality.
It's both incredibly exciting and a little bit terrifying. It seems like they're trying to get ahead of the curve. By working on a recommendation on the ethics of neurotechnology, they're not waiting for things to go wrong. They're trying to set some ground rules now.
Precisely. It's about proactive ethics. And again, the international aspect is crucial. Neurotechnology isn't limited by borders. What happens in one country can easily impact others. So having these globally agreed upon ethical frameworks is essential.
This is making me think of all those sci-fi movies where technology takes over and things go haywire. Okay, let's step away from the global stage for a moment and get into the nitty-gritty with the Hastings Center. They're tackling all sorts of bioethics dilemmas, from stem cell research to sports doping. This is where things get really real, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. What I appreciate about the Hastings Center's approach is how they use these real-world examples to illustrate the complex ethical questions we're grappling with. It's not just abstract philosophy. It's about real people facing real dilemmas.
All right, let's start with stem cells. It's a field with immense potential, but it's also ethically tricky. You read through these articles. What's the main issue at the heart of the debate?
The core ethical challenge revolves around the use of embryos for research. To get those powerful stem cells, scientists often have to extract them from human embryos, which ends up destroying those embryos. This brings up a huge question. When does life begin? What moral status do those embryos have? There are all sorts of different viewpoints on this, and the scientists are constantly searching for alternative sources of stem cells to try and sidestep the issue.
It's definitely a tough one. And then you add in the fact that there are these unregulated stem cell clinics popping up, making all sorts of promises that might not be backed up by science. It feels like a bit of a Wild West out there.
Absolutely. That lack of oversight and regulation in some areas of stem cell research is a serious concern. Patients need to be cautious and do their research before undergoing any treatment, especially if it sounds too good to be true.
Okay, enough about stem cells for now. Let's move on to another ethically charged topic, human enhancement. We all want to be better, faster, stronger, right? But what happens when technology takes over that quest for self-improvement? Where do we draw the line between therapy and enhancement?
That's a great question. When you think about it, using technology to treat diseases or disabilities is generally seen as a good thing. But what about using it to enhance our abilities beyond what's considered normal? Things like boosting our cognitive function, enhancing our physical strength, or even altering our appearance. It raises concerns about fairness, equality, and even coercion.
You know, it's making me think of that movie Gattaca, where genetic enhancement creates this whole stratified society. If you don't have the right genes, you're basically a second-class citizen. A bit extreme, maybe. But it does make you think about the potential social consequences of unchecked human enhancement.
It's a valid concern. If these enhancements become widely available, will they create a divide between the haves and the have-nots? Could people be pressured or even coerced into undergoing enhancements to keep up in a competitive society? These are questions we need to grapple with now, before these technologies become even more advanced.
Okay, let's tackle another debate that always gets people fired up. Doping in sports. Is it EVU-okay?
The ethics of sports enhancement are definitely complex. Some people see any kind of doping as cheating, plain and simple. It violates the spirit of fair play and undermines the integrity of the sport. Others argue that it's a matter of individual choice, especially in professional sports where athletes are constantly pushing their limits and looking for an edge.
It feels like a philosophical debate about what we value most in sports. Is it about pure athletic ability? Or is there room for technological intervention? What do you think? Where do you stand on this?
That's the million-dollar question, and honestly, I don't think there's a simple answer. It depends on what kind of playing field we want to create and what we believe the true purpose of sport is. Do we want to see superhuman feats of strength and speed, even if it means blurring the lines between human and machine? Or are there certain boundaries we shouldn't cross, even in the pursuit of athletic excellence?
This deep dive is definitely making me think. All right, let's get even more philosophical for a moment. With all this biotechnology advancement, it's getting harder and harder to define what's natural anymore. Are we messing with things we shouldn't? Are we playing God, as some people might say?
This is a fundamental question that comes up again and again, and it's especially relevant when we talk about things like genetic engineering. Take genetically modified organisms, GMOs for example. Are they a valuable tool for improving food production and addressing environmental challenges, or do they represent a dangerous interference with the natural world? Are we creating unintended consequences that we haven't even considered?
It feels like a tightrope walk, trying to balance scientific progress with respect for the natural world. We have this incredible power to shape the world around us, but with that power comes a responsibility to wield it wisely. It's like Spider-Man's Uncle Ben said, with great power comes great responsibility.
You got it. It's not just about what we can do, but what we should do. And that requires careful ethical consideration, weighing potential benefits against potential risks, and engaging in open and honest dialogue about the implications of these technologies.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground already. But before we move on to even more mind-bending ethical dilemmas, let's pause here and take a breath. Join us for part 2, where we'll continue exploring the fascinating, and sometimes unsettling, world of science and technology ethics.
Welcome back. Let's shift gears a bit and explore some specific cases from the Hastings Center's articles. These really bring the ethical complexities to life and show just how much we're already grappling with these issues in our daily lives.
I'm all ears. Hit me with a real head-scratcher.
All right, how about the ethics of robot caregivers? One article delves into this idea, using the movie Robot and Frank as a jumping-off point. In the movie, a robot is brought in to care for an aging man with dementia. It raises all sorts of questions about the role technology should play in elder care, especially when it comes to those more human aspects like companionship and emotional support.
It's a tricky balance, right? On one hand, robots could be amazing for practical support, helping with medication reminders, mobility assistance, even household chores. But when does it cross the line into replacing human connection? Is it ethical to rely on machines for those emotional needs, even if it's more efficient or convenient?
Exactly. And beyond the emotional aspect, there's the issue of autonomy. If a robot is making decisions about an individual's care, what they eat when they take their meds, how they spend their day, how do we ensure that the person's own wishes and preferences are respected?
It's almost like we need a whole new set of ethics guidelines for how we design and use robots in these caregiving roles.
Yep.
Okay, what else is the Hastings Center wrestling with?
Let's talk about self-driving cars. Everyone's favorite tech dilemma. One article highlighted these rules proposed by the German transport minister that specifically address unavoidable accidents. Get this, they actually prioritize property damage over personal injury, and they prohibit classifying people based on age or other factors when making those split-second decisions.
Wait, so if a self-driving car is faced with that awful choice, hit a group of pedestrians or swerve and maybe harm the passengers, it's not allowed to consider things like age or the number of people involved. That seems almost counterintuitive.
It does, doesn't it? But the idea is to prevent any kind of discrimination and ensure all lives are treated equally, at least in the eyes of the algorithm. Of course, this raises a whole host of new questions. How do you even program these ethical considerations into a machine? And who ultimately bears the responsibility when things go wrong?
It makes you wonder if we're even asking the right questions. Maybe it's not about teaching machines to be moral, but rather about making sure the humans designing them are thinking ethically. And what about the legal ramifications? If there's an accident, who gets sued? The manufacturer, the programmer, the person who is technically driving?
This is where the law is playing catch-up with technology. It's a whole new territory, forcing us to rethink our concepts of responsibility and accountability in a world where machines are making life-or-death decisions.
Talk about a legal headache. Okay, keep those examples coming. I'm ready for more ethical dilemmas.
All right, let's dive into the world of Silicon Valley and all that data they collect. One article was exploring the ethical implications of biomedical research being conducted using user data from tech companies. It's this whole new trend. Researchers are teaming up with these companies to access massive data sets for medical studies.
On the surface, it sounds like a win-win, right? You get these huge data sets that could lead to amazing medical breakthroughs. But my spidey sense is tingling. I'm sensing some major privacy concerns here.
You're spot on. The article raises serious concerns about informed consent and data security. Are people who are using these tech platforms truly aware of how their data is being shared and used, especially when it comes to sensitive health information? And are there adequate safeguards in place to protect that data from being misused or ending up in the wrong hands?
It highlights this growing tension between the potential benefits of data-driven research and the fundamental right to privacy. It's like we need a whole new set of rules for the digital age.
Absolutely. And it goes beyond just privacy. There are questions about ownership and control. Do individuals have a right to know how their data is being used? Should they be able to opt out of research studies they don't want to be part of, even if their data is already out there in the digital ether?
These are questions we need to answer sooner rather than later. Okay, give me another example. I'm hooked on these real-world cases.
Let's talk about telemedicine. It's exploded in popularity, especially since the pandemic. While it offers undeniable benefits, increased access to care convenience, and even cost savings, it also raises ethical concerns about the quality of care and the potential for exacerbating existing health disparities.
I can see that. Telemedicine relies on technology, and not everyone has equal access to technology or the digital literacy skills needed to navigate those platforms. So while it might be a great option for some, it could actually create new barriers to care for others, especially those who are already marginalized or underserved.
Exactly. The article stressed the need for clear ethical guidelines for telemedicine to ensure it's implemented in a way that's equitable and accessible, while also protecting patient privacy and confidentiality.
It's a reminder that technology itself isn't inherently good or bad. It's all about how we use it and who has access to it. Okay, let's switch gears a bit and talk about scientific integrity itself. One of the articles from the Hastings Center delved into this issue, highlighting concerns about the pressure to publish and the potential for misconduct in research. It's a good reminder that scientists, just like anyone else, can be influenced by external pressures.
It's about creating a culture of scientific integrity, where researchers are encouraged to prioritize rigor and honesty above all else. We need to make sure there are systems in place that promote ethical conduct, encourage researchers to report misconduct, and protect whistleblowers.
Because at the end of the day, trust in science is paramount. If people lose faith in the scientific process, it undermines everything. Right, what other ethical dilemmas did you unearth from those Hastings Center articles?
There was one that really caught my eye. It explored the debate around xenotransplantation, which is the transplantation of organs from animals to humans. They discussed a recent groundbreaking case where a pig's heart was successfully transplanted into a human patient.
Wow, that's incredible. But I can also see the ethical minefield that opens up. Are there risks of transmitting animal diseases to humans? What about the welfare of the animals being used for organ harvesting?
You're hitting all the key points. The article dives into those concerns: the potential for cross-species infection, the need for rigorous screening and monitoring, and the ethical implications of genetically modifying and breeding animals specifically for organ donation.
It's almost like we need a whole separate branch of ethics, just for dealing with these interspecies interactions.
I think you're right. This case really pushes us to consider the ethical implications for both humans and animals involved. The article advocates for a cautious approach, with tons of ethical review and ongoing assessment of both the scientific and ethical aspects. As this field develops,
It's another reminder that every medical advancement comes with its own set of ethical challenges, and we can't afford to shy away from those tough conversations. Okay, last one for this round. And I have a feeling this one's going to be a doozy.
you're probably referring to the article that delves into the complex world
Mm-hmm.
of intersex individuals and the ethical challenges they face, particularly in the realm of sports. It's an issue that's often misunderstood and mishandled.
Yeah, this is a topic that's loaded with sensitivity, and I know it's one that you've done a lot of research on.
It's a topic close to my heart,
Mm-hmm.
and it deserves much more nuanced discussion than it often receives. The article uses the case of Caster Semenya, a South African runner who was subjected to intense scrutiny and regulations because of her naturally high testosterone levels.
Yeah.
To illustrate the broader issues,
Her case sparked international debate, and it really put a spotlight on how ill-equipped we are to deal with biological diversity in a way that's fair and respectful.
exactly, it raises questions about fairness in competition, but also much deeper questions about inclusion, bodily autonomy, and the very definition of what it means to be male or female. The article calls for a more inclusive approach to sex verification in sports, one that recognizes the natural variations that exist in human biology and avoids unnecessary medical interventions.
This is a perfect example of how ethics isn't always about finding black and white answers. It's about navigating those gray areas with sensitivity and compassion. Okay, I think we've given our brains enough to chew on for now. In part 3, we'll try to synthesize all of this. What does it all mean for the future of science and technology? Join us then.
Welcome back for the final part of our deep dive into the ethics of science and technology. I don't know about you, but my head is spinning a bit after all those case studies.
It's been quite a journey, hasn't it? From global guidelines on AI to those very personal dilemmas. Faced by individuals navigating a world increasingly shaped by technology? Yeah, it really hit home for me that these ethical challenges aren't just theoretical. They're impacting real people's lives right now, and we've only scratched the surface of what's to come. As science and technology continue to advance at this breakneck pace.
That's why it feels so urgent to have these conversations now. We can't afford to just sit back and be passive observers. We need to actively engage in shaping this future, asking those tough questions and making sure our values are reflected in the technologies we create and how we use them.
I keep thinking about something you said earlier. Ethical reflection isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. It's like we're at a crossroads, and the choices we make today will have a ripple effect for generations to come.
Exactly. It's not just about avoiding harm, it's about actively pursuing a better future. How can we use these powerful tools to create a more just, equitable, and sustainable world? How do we ensure that everyone benefits from these advancements, not just a select few?
That's the challenge, and it's a big one. I'm starting to see that we need to move beyond just reacting to whatever new technology pops up. We need to be more proactive, anticipating potential challenges, setting boundaries, and maybe even steering the development of technologies in a direction that aligns with our values.
I think that's a brilliant insight. It's about moving from reactive ethics to proactive ethics. Instead of just playing catch-up, we need to be shaping the game itself.
It reminds me of the concept of responsible innovation. It's not just about innovating for the sake of innovation, but about ensuring that innovation serves a greater purpose.
Precisely. And that requires a real shift in mindset, a recognition that science and technology are not neutral forces. They are shaped by human values, for better or for worse.
So if we want to create a future where science and technology are used for good, we need to start with ourselves. We need to examine our own values, understand the potential impact of these advancements, and have those sometimes uncomfortable conversations about what kind of world we want to build.
This is where the power of dialogue comes in. Scientists, policymakers, ethicists, the public. We all need to be part of this conversation. We need diverse voices, diverse perspectives to ensure that we're considering all the angles,
Mhm.
all the potential consequences.
This deep dive has definitely been an eye-opener for me, and I hope it's been the same for you listening out there. It feels like we've just scratched the surface. But in a way that makes it all the more exciting. There's so much to explore, so much to learn, so much to discuss.
I couldn't agree more. The future is not predetermined. It's a tapestry woven from the choices we make today. So let's choose wisely, let's choose ethically, and let's create a future where science and technology are truly forces for good in the world.
Welcome
That's a
to our
perfect note to
deep
end
dive
on.
into the
Thanks for
ethics
joining
of
us on
science
this
and
deep
technology.
dive into the
You've
ethics
picked
of
a
science
topic
and
with
technology.
huge
And remember, this
implications.
conversation doesn't end
To
here.
tackle this,
Keep asking
we've
those
got
tough
excerpts from
questions.
UNESCO
Stay
site.
curious
They're taking
and
the
stay
international
engaged.
perspective.
The future
and
is
some
in
deep
our
dives
hands.
from the Hastings Center, a U.S. Bioethics Research Institute. Buckle up. There's a lot to cover.
Indeed, these sources provide a fascinating contrast. UNESCO tackles these big picture issues like AI, neurotechnology, and even climate change. While the Hastings Center really zooms in on specific bioethics dilemmas, they use these real-world cases, which I always find helps ground the conversation.
It's like getting the global view and then the street level view, which is awesome. Our mission, if you will, is to give you a solid grasp of the key ethical questions these advancements raise. But we're not just talking theory here. We'll be diving into some truly thought-provoking cases to really illustrate these points.
It's going to be a fascinating journey. So shall we start with UNESCO? They're known for World Heritage Sites. But as you delved into their work, you saw they're taking on a much bigger role in this world of rapidly advancing science.
Exactly. It's like they're stepping up to be the ethics referees as science gets more and more powerful. What I found interesting is how they call themselves a standard setter. They're not just pointing fingers, they're trying to create actual guidelines for everyone to follow.
That global perspective is crucial, especially with technologies like AI and neurotechnology, which we'll discuss more in a bit. These advancements have implications that reach far beyond national borders, so having a global body like UNESCO working on ethical frameworks is essential.
Okay, so let's talk about AI. You've probably noticed it's everywhere now, but UNESCO isn't just celebrating the cool factor, they're highlighting some serious ethical concerns. What are they most worried about?
Their focus is on the need for what they call sound and reasoned policies. AI can be this amazing tool for good. Think about healthcare, education, all sorts of fields. But it can also be misused, or even just accidentally create new problems. The big question is, how do we make sure AI is developed and used in a way that protects basic human rights, dignity, and fairness?
Right, because it's one thing to say, hey, let's have ethical AI, but how do we actually enforce that? UNESCO even has this thing called the Global AI Ethics and Governance Observatory. Sounds pretty intense.
It is. Think of it as a global watchdog for AI. They monitor developments, conduct research,